Hey everybody, welcome to John's Briefs with my friend Mark Victor from Attorneys for Freedom and from the Live and Let Live movement. And I want to talk today, we had a video on the channel of a martial arts instructor who dude tried to steal her phone and she wasn't having it and got her phone back. So let's talk about using force to defend property. Today's video is brought to us by Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners with a 24/7 emergency hotline and plans designed specifically for self-defenders. They are offering a discount on their plan to ASP fans, so hit the link in the description for that. So Mark, you watched this one and you said, okay, wait a minute. Now, obviously, again, go watch the video. I think that it speaks in some ways for itself, but there's always limits here. And man, anytime that I talk about the use of force to defend property, and particularly deadly force to defend property, I get people from Texas that say, but my Texas. We're not gonna talk about Texas law here. You gotta understand Texas Penal Code 942 and 943, a little beyond the scope today. But talk to me about using force in defense of property.
Well, I think the first lesson from this video is if you plan to steal a cell phone from somebody, don't choose a martial arts instructor.
I mean, talk about victim selection fail. They're standing right outside her martial arts school, right?
Bad choice.
Bad choice of victim.
But anyways, look, she was great, right?
Yeah.
I think, when you narrated the video and you talked about she got the phone back and then there's still this, bad idea. Get the phone back, move on, end of incident. Because the guy could have had a gun. He said he had a gun. Turned out he didn't have a gun. She thought he didn't have a gun, but she could have been wrong.
Right.
And she could have sort of provoked this guy to pulling out a gun and shoot. I mean, do you really want to bet your life on that? Take the phone. I mean, I think there's a good argument to say maybe let the guy take the phone and move on. Call your phone provider, have them block the thing, get a new phone on insurance, and move on with your life. But she opted to avail herself of her legal right to use reasonable, ordinary physical force to recover property. What's interesting about this, in my opinion, is sometimes the law's not very clear between whether you are simply using force to protect property or whether you are using force to protect yourself. Because, imagine I often use the example of somebody stealing a TV from your house. Okay, well, if somebody's stealing a TV from your house, no, you don't get to shoot them because you want to protect your TV. This is using deadly physical force to protect property, and maybe other than Texas, although I got to say I'm a tad bit skeptical of how much deadly force you could use to protect property there. But in fairness, I haven't reviewed that statute. But generally speaking, no, you don't get to use deadly physical force. But if you did, there might be an argument that, well, while this guy was stealing the TV, he turned and started approaching me, and I thought he was going to hit me over the head with that television set. Well, now you're at risk of a serious physical injury or maybe death, depending on how big a screen he stole.
Could be a big TV.
Could be a big TV. So there are arguments. This is one of the reasons that I tell people it's best to just not say anything, right? Because after you do exercise some force to maybe collect your property, and the police are going to come and ask you what happened. And if you open your mouth and say, well, I shot the guy because he was stealing my TV, that's a different statement than I shot the guy because he was going to hit me over the head with the TV that he just stole. Those are two different things. And once you make that statement, you've locked yourself into a legal theory. So I think, especially at the time you're making the statement, it's never a good time to make a statement right after this happens. So I guess what I'm getting at here, it's just like the prohibition on using physical force against somebody who's just using words, right? If I say, John, you're a dirty, rotten SOB, blah, 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 well, you don't get to punch me in the face.
Right.
But if I say, John, you're a dirty, rotten SOB, blah, 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 and I'm walking towards you as I'm saying it, and I've got my
your fist,
yes, well, now we got a little bit more. And so those important factual distinctions may not be something that the average person is thinking to say to the police, especially at the time that the police are there and you have the trauma of the event and all this other stuff. Not to mention the police officer, you may put that in and the police officer may omit that, either intentionally, bad cop, or negligently, bad cop, but with good intentions, just negligent cop. So why risk any of that? I use examples like this to tell people you got a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. It was very hard fought It's not going to be used against you if you do remain silent, right? If you get to trial, the prosecutor doesn't get to stand in front of the jury and say, look, ladies and gentlemen, if the defendant really was not guilty, why didn't he just tell the cop at the scene what happened? None of that's coming in. In fact, you're going to get the opposite of that at your trial. Very likely, the judge is going to instruct the jury in some form that, look, that the defendant didn't testify at this trial is not something you can consider. You can't use it against the defendant. They got a right to remain silent. So always good to keep your mouth shut. But again, when it comes to, and we've talked about this in other videos, for me, I'm not going to get into a fight over property. Your property's probably insured, right? If you've got a homeowner, if you own a home and you probably have a homeowner's policy because you have a mortgage on your home, and your property is probably insured. Your car is insured. I'm not going to get into a big fight. I'm not risking what's most precious to me, which is my life
And my health.
And my health and the lives and health of people around me who might be there at the scene. I'm not going to get into that big fight.
And I get that some people are like, John, that represents my time. That's my property. I paid time for that, blah, blah. I might argue that maybe the concept of trading time for money might be a flawed concept that you might want to think about. That maybe trading your expertise instead, rather than your time, is a better way to look at things, and you can always make more money, right? I can't make more me. Well, maybe I could if I eat too much, but that's a separate topic. But the point there is that, if I said, hey, you know what, you're either going to give me $300 today, or you and I are getting in a fist fight. And I've already got the $300. If you want this $300, you and I are going to get in a fist fight. I might go, I'm not really excited about getting in a fist fight for $300 today. Now it's wrong. And
absolutely,
I'm gonna go and outsource that violence, officer.
Yep,
that's my $300. I want
right.
my $300 back, and that's okay. Maybe you decide in that moment, though. Is it okay when somebody grabs your cell phone to grab it back and go, "Hey, man, that's mine. Get off my stuff."
That seems pretty low in terms of a transaction cost. But to then approach this guy who's saying he's got a gun, I'm not going there. I'm going to be done. Now, I'll also say, I think that as the value of the property increases, the value of the time that you've put to accumulate that property increases. So if somebody is going to steal the equivalent of your life savings or something, I think maybe the law could be modified here. It might be reasonable to say, and again, this is not the law in most places. Maybe it is in Texas, I don't know, but certainly not in Arizona. The law in most places is you don't get, no matter what the property is worth, you don't get to use deadly physical force. I guess I could go along with a community that says, look, if the property is over this amount, maybe $100,000 or something substantial, hey, maybe the answer here is people shouldn't be stealing other people's property. There are consequences for that. So
goes back to the days of the horse thief, in these Old West kind of laws, which Texas is unique. But I would make the counter argument that the law about a horse thief was more about somebody being stuck out in the wilderness without a horse than it was the horse itself. So that's kind of a standing thing. Now, here's the other part of that, though, Mark, is that he made the intimation. He said in the middle of that, hey, I have a gun.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the question then becomes, wait a minute. So before this, we had a theft of property, and then she resisted that with ordinary physical force, which is entirely appropriate.
No
We're
problem.
okay. Now he makes the verbal assessment, sticks his hand in his pocket, and says, I have a gun. Is it reasonable at that point, from the law's eyes, if I said, I believe you, and that put me in fear of great bodily harm, and so I shot that guy?
I think the issue you're going to have there, and it may be justified because you're starting to get into gray areas here. I think the issue that I would immediately have come to mind would be imminency. Okay, normally we like to sort of see the gun or something, just that the hand is in the pocket with the threat. Maybe a prosecutor would let that slide if you shoot the person. It turns out there's no gun. The argument from the defense attorney is you've already got a guy who's an aggressor. He's already stole property. Now he's making a threat to have a gun. He's got his hand in his pocket. He could literally shoot with his hand in his pocket. So there could be an argument that it's imminent. Although I worry a little bit because if the gun wasn't coming out, if the gun comes out and there's a threat, I think
all bets are off.
All bets are off. You're in good shape at that point. But we sort of hold officers to this standard, right? We've got cases where officers have shot people, and generally speaking, if they shoot them without seeing the gun, we're going to feel as civil rights attorneys,
More scrutiny here.
this is a problem, right? If the officer shot the citizen and you didn't see a gun, I'm going to have more problems with that. If the gun's coming out and the officer shoots, or the knife's coming out and the officer shoots, that's probably not a case I'm going to take.
But this is probably a great reason to practice not just a draw of your firearm and a shot, but a draw and a command. You know, if he says, hey, I have a gun, show me your hands. Let me see your hands right now. And then again, if that hand comes out with a gun in it, now then much more reasonable at that moment.
Yeah, even though the laws are written in many places where use of deadly force is treated the same way as a threat of deadly physical force. In other words, you could be prosecuted for threatening deadly physical force, maybe to protect property, although there are some exceptions to that in our statutes here. But there again, Arizona is very pro self-defense as well. And we should talk about the burden of proof here. Yeah, I think, look, let me sum it up by saying this. Reasonable minds can disagree on what level of force is appropriate for any given specific transaction. I think that the smart person says, if I can avoid getting into that split-second decision where consequences are really big on either side, really big on either side, if I can avoid that, it's what you harp on over and over and over again. And yeah, we like this video, we like how it turned out, but it turned out good. It didn't have to turn out good. She should have taken the phone, in my opinion, and sort of moved off. And then the guy comes out with the baseball bat.
Yeah, guy comes out later with the bat, and I'm like,
I gotta
put
say,
the bat away, bro.
I gotta say, I'm not bothered by the bat in his hand.
No, you like it.
I'm not bothered by the bat in his hand. He's holding it because he's not using it. Just because he's got the bat in his hand, I'm okay. And also, I remember that in that video you talked a little bit about the bat and its deadly physical force, and it certainly could be. However, I would, with a very straight face, argue that that bat could be used as ordinary physical force as well, right? It can be used to poke someone, to hit them in the leg or something like that. I think
that's why we talk to the attorney and not just the self-defense guy.
Yeah, we don't like to make it so simple, like just because you have this in your hand, automatically that's deadly physical force. I think the question is not just the instrument you're using, but how was the instrument used?
Yeah.
What was the manner in which it was used? Because I could see that particular, first of all, it's a baseball bat. Kids use them all the time. We don't think of them as weapons. The same instrument can be used as a weapon. It could be used as a deadly physical force weapon, hitting someone over the head. I could also see how it could be used as an ordinary physical force weapon. But Daddy Had It, to me, just says he's prepared. And I kind of like this guy coming out with that. Although I'll also note, he took a chance. He made a moral decision.
He did.
I'm going to go help her. And if this guy had a gun, bringing a baseball bat,
That ain't going to help you.
we know that too. So anytime you're going to get involved, as you say, this is why we preach caution, right? Because you don't know how it's going to go. And if the guy actually had a gun and shot and had killed everybody there, this would have been a different kind of video. And we would be talking about the real risks of pushing too far in these situations.
All right, what Mark said about the baseball bat makes sense to me. So what I said about him not wanting to bring that baseball bat, I repent of. That was probably cool for him to do that. I think it's great to get another perspective, man. So be cautious, be smart, act on that must principle, not on that can principle, and I think you'll be safe. Mark, thanks for the insight, man.
Thanks for having me, brother.